The biggest problem that I hear with orchestras playing the Dance of Iscariot is with their intonation. They just play out of tune. And there's reasons for that. There's a lot of chromaticism in there. There are some extended fingerings and so on. And the students at this level may not be as used to playing with those finger patterns. My first year of teaching, Michael Allen told me that I was doing a great disservice to my students by still having them play with pitch markers on their instruments. And at the time, I didn't really take that very well, but I kind of started working it into my understanding of teaching, and I now understand that when you use pitch markers on your instruments, like you could mark all of the C sharps on the G strings, you can mark all of those D sharps on the D string and just put like a little smiley face sticker there and just put your finger on the sticker. But if you do that, they're never really going to learn how to play in tune. And it's because they're learning to tune visually when they should be listening, okay? And as we all know from science class, the ears are the best organs to detect sound, not the eyes. Now, even in my teaching, I have the same feeling about those chromatic tuners. I think that you should use those really sparingly, because at a certain point, you start holding your students back. They should start using their ears to tune and start developing that culture of tuning in the classroom. And hey, guess what? There's another thing too. Like, you put that smiley face sticker exactly where that C sharp should be. Well, if the student plays it and they're not putting enough finger pressure down, it's going to be flat. They're not going to be playing C sharp. So there's a physical side of tuning too, where you have to address the technique. Doesn't matter how many pinstripe taping things you put on your instruments or how many little stickers or whatever, they're not going to be able to play in tune. The other thing that I see is like on cellos and basses, they're trying to get the students to play with their thumbs in the right spot and not, have their thumbs peeking over there. And so a lot of them take those like little corn pads that you can get from the pharmacy section at your drugstore, in the orthopedic section, I put there and okay, just put your thumb in this little thing. And that's cool if they're playing in first position, yeah, great. But if they need to play an augmented or 3/4 pattern, well, they need to move their thumb forward. And if their thumb's stuck in that little thing, it's not going to work out. And if they're playing in half position, like if they're playing E, D sharp, D, like they do right in the beginning of this piece, well, their thumb needs to be in line with the E. And if it's not, they're not going to be playing in tune. In season 1, episode 3, I go into much more detail on intonation. It's a whole episode dedicated towards trying to develop that culture of tuning in your ensemble and addressing some of those technical things that might be interfering with your students' ability to play in tune, okay? And this is coming from someone who had difficulty teaching intonation at the beginning of his teaching career, and it was kind of a mess my first year of teaching, and I kind of developed all these strategies to fix that. And so you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. You can, come to this stage of my career where I have some strategies to solve those issues. So you can just watch that episode and be 10 years ahead of where I was. So if the technique is perfect, if the thumb is in the right spot, if the fingers are where they're supposed to be, if the left hand shapes are there, if they're not squeezing, okay, now it's a listening problem. And if they're doing everything technically that they're supposed to do correctly and they're still having problems with intonation, it's because they're not listening to each other, and we got to get them to listen. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to play finger patterns. And that's the first thing I have students do in every teaching companion I've ever written is we start with the finger patterns, okay? Can we play these homophonic notes in tune? And if not, well, we need to fix that. And we need to play this through very slowly and not go on until the next note is in tune. If you're playing out of tune, you go on to the next note, you're telling them, oh, that's okay, that's good enough, and it's going to break their ears, okay? It's going to destroy the culture of tuning. So you have to have them insist on playing in tune. If you're having trouble, like they're just not adjusting on their own, they're not getting into pitch on their own, well, make them play out of tune, okay? Have them put their finger in the complete wrong spot and then have them make that adjustment. So if they're going in with the assumption that they're out of tune and then they adjust on the fly, they probably weren't making that assumption beforehand. They're like, well, it sounds in tune to me. So make them play out of tune and then have them pull back, and you'll increase the accuracy of their tuning and you'll increase the culture of tuning in your classroom. The Dance of Iscariot will absolutely punish you if your students cannot play in tune. There are intonation pitfalls all over here. And there's some strategies on how to deal with that, but if you don't manage those strategies, they're going to play really out of tune. Okay, so the next common problem is going to be with resetting the bow. Okay, particularly if you're playing off the string, or there are places in here even where you're even if you have them play on the string, there's still a rest, and we got to recover from that rest. So can the student start on the string and grip the string and play in real time? And again, that's a 3-step process. Set the bow, grip the string, and then play. And a lot of times they skip steps, or they don't go through the entire process, and then it kind of sounds like a mess. You get some ricochet bows happening, you get some entrances that aren't together as a result. So we need to make sure that the students are learning how to play and then set and then play. I address this here in the Teaching Companion, which is available on teachingorchestra.com. Just a very simple exercise: play, set, play, set. Do you need to buy the Teaching Companion to teach your students how to set the bow? No, of course not. You can probably figure out everything in here. Some people just like to have stuff written down. They like to be organized or whatever, and I give them a copy. It does take me some time to make these things, so I do charge a little bit of money for it. But if you feel like it's useful, maybe try one of them and see if it works for you. Your students are now playing with the proper technique. They're setting the bow, they're gripping the string before they play, and it's still not working out. Well, why is that? Well, maybe it's because they don't have rosin on their bows. You ask your students like, hey, did you rosin your bow today? And they're like, yeah, rosin my bow. Okay, really? Where's your rosin? Yeah, go rosin your bow. Sometimes a kid will hand me an instrument because their peg slipped or something. Like, hey, can you help me tune this? And I'll start playing. It's like what is going on here? There's no rosin on this bow. Huh? What do you mean? Did you rosin your bow today? Of course I rosin my bow today. Yeah, right. I know that the economy is not what it was before the pandemic, but please invest in rosin. It's not that expensive. Go recycle cans, whatever it takes. Get some rosin and get it on your bow. Do the students understand their roles? Okay, do they understand when they have melody and when they have harmony? Now, are all of these non-divisi notes, is this melody? No, not even close, okay? These brushstrokes here, is that even melody? It's closer to something like melody, but melody is not here until 7, where the A theme comes in the first violins. So your students are just crushing these double stops, because they're playing non-divisi at the frog, and they're just destroying the stuff. Well, you might not be able to hear everything else that's going on. So you might want to do a little bit of balance strategy here, and you might want to have them play a little closer to the fingerboard. And if that doesn't work, have them play on the fingerboard. Okay, it's piano, non-divisi at the frog. That's going to be challenging. It's got accents, okay? It does have a crescendo that kind of like builds up into the first violin entrance at 7. So maybe we can have them play a little bit more vertically if you're having them play off the string. And then as they go, get more and more horizontal. And then at 7, they're a good mezzo forte. But we've got to do something to address when we have melody, when we don't have a melody, okay? Same thing here in violas when they're playing these non-divisi notes. Is that going to smash and cover everything else up? Are we going to be able to hear the first and second violins? Are we going to, maybe we can hear the first violins, but can we hear the second violins? Okay, well, how are the second violins playing close enough to the bridge to where they can be heard? Okay, maybe not. Okay, maybe they're out of tune and we can't hear them because they're not playing the D sharps in tune. All right, out of tune notes sound softer than in tune notes. It's a physics thing, okay? It doesn't resonate if it's not in tune. Like the instruments are made to resonate at certain frequencies. Hopefully they were designed that way by a maker that knows what they were doing. And if not, you bought your violin from the mall. Well, I can't help you there. Just get a better violin. I don't know what else to tell you. There's probably somebody right now in the comments just been like, oh, at our mall, there's a master luthier that studied with Stradivarius himself. Okay, fine. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those like mall, like H&H type instrument stores where, they sell you these violins that have like packing, the plastic wrap over the top of them. You might have balance problems here in the fugue, all right? Do your students understand the art of fugue? All right, do they understand subject, counter, subject, whatever. Like, no, they probably don't, right? And so you got to tell them. And Kurt Mosier like writes the dynamics for you so that you could get a better understanding on this. But, they might not know that, the second violins and violas are mezzo forte there, and they're supposed to be forte. So you gotta tell them, and you gotta give them some strategies on how to fix those balance problems. An easy way to adjust your balance is just to move Boeing lanes. And what do I mean by Boeing lane? I mean your bow in the relationship spatially to either the bridge or the fingerboard, okay? When you play closer to the bridge, it changes the waveform, okay, or the way the sound wave looks to make it a little more jagged and rough, and that is a sound that's going to be able to project and be able to cut through the orchestral sound. And if you play closer to the fingerboard, it's the opposite. It smooths out the sound a little bit more so that you're going to be able to make a more blending sound. So you can manipulate balance and blend a lot by bowing lane. And I think a lot of orchestras don't ever address bowing lane other than, hey, don't play over the fingerboard basses. That's basically the only time you'll hear them talk about bowing lane. But that's what separates from the pros from the Joes a lot of times is like, where are you playing in relationship to the bridge or the fingerboard? And are you playing strategically in the right bowing lane? I like to number bowing lanes. I like to start off with the bridge at bowing lane 0, and then closer to the fingerboard, bowing lane 1, bowing lane 2, bowing lane 3 is about in the middle, bowing lane 4, bowing lane 5 is about even with the fingerboard. That way I can use my spatial coaching cues, and I can just say bowing lane 2, and then everybody knows what I'm talking about. Bowing lane 4, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Or I just hold up a 2, like in the UIL sight reading room where my second violins have melody and they're not playing loud enough, and I just do this, and they see my fingers and they're like, oh, we better get our bows closer to the bridge, and then all of a sudden it transforms the sound. All right, the next problem is the Accelerando. A lot of times this Accelerando is a mess, okay? We have all the best intentions, and then we're just not together here, and then the low strings come in. Can the low strings differentiate? If it's so much of a mess coming in before 86, do the low strings, by listening, can they hear? Do you have to give them a huge cue because this is all jumbled up and they can't hear what's happening? Sometimes they come in the right spot, and then it kind of gets back together, and hopefully with enough prayers, 93 is together, but that's not ideal, right? So what you want to do is you want to start right here at 85. And whatever tempo you set for the presto, whatever your interpretation is, whatever your orchestra can handle, keep that tempo and run from 85 to the end several times. Or you don't necessarily have to go to the end, but run several measures of it. Okay, let's do that again, let's do that again, let's do that again, to solidify that tempo so that everybody knows where we're going. Okay, now let's go back a little ways. Now, let's go back to 82 and then get into it. So we're going to go 82 at quarter note equals 148, and then we're going to play these two measures at tempo, and then we're going to do our Accelerando here, and then we're going to hopefully meet that tempo that we practice so much in 85. If it doesn't work out, well, repeat that process, okay? Start at 85, run it several times, try to get that solidified, try to make sure everybody understands, okay, this is where we're going, this is where we're going. Then go back to 82, quarter note equals 148, and then quick Accelerando, boom, presto, can we find that tempo again? Just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. That's probably the best way I know to solidify that Accelerando so that everybody's on the same page. We got to know where we're going. So if we've been there before, it's easy to know where we're going. Transitions are usually the hardest parts of any piece of music, whether you're playing with the George Washington Carver Intermediate School Orchestra or you're playing with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, the transitions are going to be usually where you spend the most time. Sir Thomas Beecham made a living on the rehearsal process of, hey, we're just going to run through this symphony and then we're going to go back and work on the transitions and then we're ready. Some might argue that he made a living on some of his inappropriate comments and jokes that he made to the orchestra, and that might be true. However, in this day and age, I don't think you could get away with that anymore, so I would refer back to his rehearsal method of just run through it and then go back and work on the trouble spots. Hey, but you know what's not going to be bad for your career is leaving a comment in the comment section below. In fact, that could be really good for your career if you got a question that you want to ask about the dance of Iscariot. Hey, I'm having trouble here. How can I make my orchestra sound better? Or maybe you can help somebody else. Hey, I've had this problem that wasn't in this video, and this is the problem I had, and this is the way I solved it. And that would be really good for other people because they could learn from you. So, hope you enjoyed my take on the dance of Iscariot, and I'll see you next time.